Hello and welcome back to Digital Transformation 2020, brought to you by Digit. I'm Mark Stephen. I'm chairing today's event. Now, this is session 2, in which we're going to be considering how you get digital programs to actually do what you want them to do, namely to drive positive customer outcomes, to help solve business challenges, and to minimise or maximise impact within your organisation. Our first speaker is Esther Stringer, Managing Director for Border Crossing UX. And Esther's going to be looking at how you go about mapping success. So Esther, over to you.
Thanks, Mark. Good morning, everyone. My name is Esther Stringer and I'm the Managing Director of Border Crossing UX. And we're a user experience specialist company based in Edinburgh and London. And I'd like to thank you for joining me today for my session, Mapping Success, Driving Valuable Transformations in Extraordinary Circumstances. And just the fact that I'm talking to you today from my flat in Edinburgh and imagining looking at all your lovely faces back at me is a perfect example of what extraordinary circumstances we have all faced this year, but also a great example of how you can quickly transform your business to still deliver valuable interactions by adapting your way of thinking and utilizing the changes in technology and human behavior. Because there's no doubt about it, unless you're Jeff Bezos, 2020 has been more than tough. It's been shit. The disruption to every aspect of our life has been immense, and the context in which we live has changed forever. Because normally at this conference, we're discussing disruption due to the changes in markets, technology, or legislation. But this year we've had to deal with all of that, as well as global upheaval. We've witnessed environmental destruction, global civil unrest, continued political manipulation, cyber warfare, and dangerous propaganda. And all of this has occurred as the world has shut down region by region due to the COVID-19 pandemic, a global health crisis that most of us have never seen before. And then consequently, an economic crisis that makes 2008 look easy to navigate. So yeah, 2020 has been terrible. It's really sucked, but it's also been really fascinating from a transformational point of view, because the global context has changed for everyone, resulting in major changes in both functional and emotional behavior. From a functional point of view, we've had to become digital by default, as shown as data provided by the ONS, Bazaar Voice Network, MRSIS, and other reputable sources. Because people couldn't go to the shops for anything more than essential, it's not surprising that the first-time number of online shoppers went up by 66% this August, compared to 2019. Video chat has increased exponentially, with more than 7 out of 10 adults making a call at least once a week. The changes in the student experience, as well as the online experience for citizens, has been immense, with schools providing lessons online, consultations being provided by GP, and with everyone having to change the way that they work from home, or even having to work at a distance in the office, our teams have had to adopt new routines, rituals, and learn how to communicate and collaborate in new ways. And from an emotional point of view, it's been quite the roller coaster. There has understandably been a huge increase in people suffering from both physical and mental health issues. The changes to the way we've lived our lives have been implemented rapidly and have been hard for us all to adopt, and in some cases even understand what to do. But it's not all been bad. There have been plus sides of things. We have seen an increase in empathy and community, especially in our local neighbourhoods. There have been numerous examples of private, public, and third sectors working together, realigning and achieving great things, like making sure children have the technology and access to digital that they need. Our communities have been forced to reassess how we're structured, how we organise, and how we value each other. And we've created armies of volunteers who are making sure the most vulnerable have the food and the support they need to live. So whilst we have faced extraordinary times this year, the most weird year I've ever lived through, we have proven that if we focus and we work together, we can ensure that we all remain fed, homed, educated, and connected. So even in these very difficult times, there can be positive things for our societies and our businesses. So how do you as an organisation make sure that in extraordinary circumstances, you can still drive valuable transformations? Well, the key, I think, is to take a moment to pause and reassess. Because if the context of the world has changed, you have to change with it in order to survive. So if you think about your digital transformation as a journey, at the end of 2019, it probably would be reasonable to view it as a climb up a mountain towards your goal. But then the avalanche of 2020 happened. And just like an avalanche, you can't ignore it. You must stop and think about what you're going to do. First things first, you make sure your team is safe and that you can communicate and can plan together. Because never have we had to rely on our teams and partners so much. And once you've got everyone safe and back in communication, the key is to assess the situation and realign your priorities to fit the new context. You should review your goals and the skills and the resources that you have and decide what to do next. And generally, I think you have one of four options. The first option is to stop and abandon. And there is absolutely no shame in doing this. Sometimes the best thing that you can do is actually stop what you are doing. Ask yourselves, in this new context, is it still possible, practical, or even necessary for you to achieve your original goal? Maybe you need to stop what you're doing and start working towards a new goal altogether. Or you can take option 2, which is to pause and set up a base camp, if you will, and wait for that disruption to pass and see what the world will look like afterwards. If you have plenty of time and plenty of resources, this might well be the right option. But not everyone has that luxury. Not everyone has the people or the time to wait and do that. And what if your transformation is being driven by something else like regulatory changes? Well, in that case, you could take option 3 and you could forge on. It may take a little bit longer to reach your goal. If you have the right tools and skills and resources, then forge ahead and keep going. But maybe you can't keep going as planned, but you do still need to reach that goal. Then you can take option 4 and refactor your plan to reach your goal. Maybe you can still get to the original place that you wanted to be, but you need to take a different route or use alternative methods. You can refactor your plans and utilize the best tools and skills for the new route to success. And maybe by doing this, you can find a way to accelerate your transformation and reach your goals faster. But under the current physical, emotional, and functional strain on our lives, how can you make sure that you're making the right decision for your organization? Well, my advice is to make use of a framework that allows your whole team to first objectively assess the situation, catalog the resources and tools that you have at your disposal, and then bravely answer some potentially hard questions like, why are we doing this? Who will benefit from this and who will not? Can we afford to do it now? Can we afford not to do it now? What will it look and feel like when we get there? How are we going to do it within the new context? And perhaps most importantly, what will be the return of investment for our organization, our customers, and society? By answering these questions in an honest and positive way, you'll be able to make the right decisions and prioritize your efforts based on your unique situation. The easiest way I find to be able to frame, collaboratively create, and share a vision is using a transformation canvas. Much like a product canvas or a business case canvas, a transformation canvas allows you to share the big picture and the plan in 6 pages of A4 or less. There are 5 key steps to creating a robust yet flexible transformation canvas. You first review all your business cases. You then reprioritize those projects and develop robust project plans. Then you roadmap them into your transformation and combine all of that into your final transformation canvas. So you start off by reviewing each project and business case that you have and that you are currently undergoing as part of your transformation plan. This is an extremely important step because it allows you to understand what's currently happening and what your plans are for the future. Now, we like to use a business case canvas for this, but there are 4 key factors you should focus on. What is the effort to deliver, the cost to deliver, the risk of delivery, and the value if it is delivered. Once you have marked out where all these business cases sit, you can then use a prioritization matrix to work out what you should do first. So you map them on axes of effort, risk, cost, and value to work out which projects to avoid, which to investigate or consider, and which you must prioritize to deliver your transformation. Once you've mapped out all of your cases, you start to refactor your project plans or fill them out to where you are with the new context. Start with your prioritization plans, and then if you want to, you can look at create a backlog for the ones that you want to investigate or consider. Once you have refactored all of your project plans into robust plans, you should align them to the outcomes you're looking to deliver to achieve your goal. So map out each outcome that you will deliver during your transformational program, and then align the projects or business cases to them underneath. Now you have the basis for your transformation canvas. So you'll be able to start working on it. You start by writing out the context of the situation. So what is your organization's brand strategy? What is your vision and mission? Why do you exist? And then write down what are the key industry and environmental factors or trends that will affect your business? What internal factors are unique to your organization that will drive or impede change? Then you can map the overview of your transformation. What's its purpose? What are your macro objectives and what are your micro objectives? And how will they help you achieve your macro one? What will be the value that you create by this transformation? And how will you actually assess that? It's also really important at this time that you take into consideration the changes you're making and how they will affect the organization, your customers, and your internal teams. And how will you be able to onboard them and help them take advantage of these changes? Once you've detailed your overview, you focus on your future target state. So what will the future look like when you've achieved your goals? What risks and challenges will you've had to overcome to get there? And what are the key outcomes that you will achieve and how? Next, you can add in your transition program based on your roadmap that you've already built. And this should be a high-level overview of your key milestones, the projects and activities that are aligned to them, and how you will achieve them. And finally, and very importantly, you and your team should create the key messages that you need to consistently use across the business to communicate the transition to all your stakeholders, so you can help them benefit and adopt the changes that you have made. Now, I don't doubt that you've been looking at these templates and thinking this is a lot of extra work. But by forcing yourselves to be brave and to pause and to undergo this process, you will have a concise, flexible framework and a clear plan of action. By working systematically through these questions together as a team, in under 2 to 3 days, your team will be able to focus on what matters most, be accountable for every decision and action that is taken, as well as facilitate your internal and external communications with one coherent, consistent message. Not only will it make you work better and more effectively within your current team, it will help you onboard new team members that you may need and will make all stakeholders feel supported throughout each stage of the journey. So, to sum up, 2020 has been tough, but take a moment to congratulate yourself for getting this far and acknowledge that you do not face these challenges alone. We've all had to rapidly adapt and change and survive. But do remember, it's not all bad news. When faced with extraordinary circumstances that affect your plans, you can use the disruption and take a moment to assess and realign, and then use an objective framework to co-create your new plan to reach your collective goals, and develop a transformation canvas that creates a shared vision of the future and clearly communicates what you are going to do and how you're going to do it, so that you can all focus on what matters most and deliver the most value for the least effort, whilst keeping safe and well. Thank you very much for your time today.
That was Esther Stringer. What's probably going to be our new motto, namely 2020 has been shit. We may get t-shirts printed to that effect. I'm sure a lot of people can sympathise with that. It's very interesting ideas about how to map forward success. Just to remind you, there is an opportunity to type in a question at the bottom of your screen. You can do that at any time. It could be for any of our speakers in this second session. Now, our next speaker is David Meikle, who's Chief Technical Officer for Lingo24. He's going to be talking about using AI to solve real business problems. So, David, across to you.
Thanks very much, Mark. So yeah, as Mark says, the topic of the talk is using AI to solve real business problems. And when Pete reached out, he knows we use a bit of AI machine learning at Lingo24, and he asked, could you maybe just share what your challenges are, how you've used it, and what your experience is trying to use AI and ML in practice there. So that's the rough agenda, a little bit about us, the kind of challenges we face, how we've used it, how we kind of got started and how you may want to get started, and where maybe we see the future heading. So for those of you who haven't heard of Lingo24, we are a global content company. We do principally translation of documents or video material, that kind of thing, for some of the biggest brands in the world, headquartered here in Edinburgh. And maybe what's kind of key for us is we blend the kind of brilliant network of subject matter expert translators that we have across the globe with our technology to try and help deliver this kind of work at scale and work in partnership with our customers to really go beyond the words and try and solve some real business problems. And the classic logo slide, but we're really proud of some of the brands we work with, from Elsevier, helping them translate medical content, whether it's app content or materials for training people, from Intuitive Surgical, who are one of the leaders in medical robotic devices, from brilliant brands like Patagonia and Trainline, delivering products to customers and supporting their teams deliver their global work. So lots of fantastic and varied work, whether that's big application content or printed material, or indeed even like video type stuff. That's the kind of work we do for these guys, which we're very, very proud of. So what kind of challenges does that throw up? There's some research, I think it was Sintef in Norway who originally got the stat, and most people keep reusing it year on year. It probably still holds true, even though it's from back in 2017, I believe, is that more content has been created in the last 2 years in the entire history of the human race. So where content is key for us, how do you keep up with making that content available globally? Typically when the content production is growing massively, but the budgets associated with being able to translate that content and make it available in this globalized world, it is not. For us, we have to stand behind that quality we provide to our customers. But translation's kind of subjective, and translators are also human. So when you're having to stand behind that quality of a translation, and we work in well over 120 languages, how do we make sure we're delivering good quality and managing that subjectivity piece in there when, frankly, our team don't speak all those languages, like our core delivery team, but our network of linguists do. So how do we control that and make sure we can stand behind it? And the other bit is the market as a whole is a massive market, and it's still growing. It's been typically recession-proof, but coronavirus has obviously came to test that a bit. But it's a massive market, $44 billion at last estimation, and we cover a lot of segments of it in there. The market's growing, our customers' content demand's growing. How do we scale with that, but in a sustainable manner? So that's some of the challenges we've been having to face as a business. So how do we use our artificial intelligence, ML, to kind of solve some of these challenges, or at least reduce the impact of them? One kind of common thing in translation, as you'll probably be aware, is machine translation. It's a very old technology, 1950s heritage, but it's been improving year on year. One of the key things for scale in translation is the reuse of content. So the main thing we have to do when we get a bit of content is separate the style and structure of the content from the actual words that need translated. And once we've done that, we typically look for matches against what's called a translation memory, which is basically a database of previously good translations, ones that you've reviewed, probably maybe the customers in market team have said, yeah, that's perfect, launched, and you reuse that. And that's great. You'll get lots of matches where you've seen that content before. But for stuff you've not seen before, translators' jobs is to fill in the blanks. But what if you could fill that blank with something that's quite high quality? You've probably seen it in Google now, like Gmail, you're typing, you can tab to get auto suggestions. Can you make that blank something more purposeful and it can be reused? And I like to think of it like that email your colleague sends. If it's pretty well structured, you might make a couple of tweaks, you can send it. Great, that's really quick. If it's not so well structured, a bit junky, you might have to get in there, edit a bit more. You might as well delete it and start from scratch. And that's the challenge with machine translation. So for us, filling those blanks with high quality machine translation makes translation quicker, makes translators more productive, and kind of reduces costs. It's a key thing for everyone. The advances with statistical to neural have been a game changer in that, and the bulk of our work is done like this. Then, once you've got that, the other thing we had to deal with is obviously these engines. You've got Google Translate that you may or may not use. It's kind of a common corpus, but what we are building is customized machine translation engines for customers' content. But they get trained on a core set of data. They are then static, and over time you need to retrain them. This is expensive. So what if we could make it learn on the fly? And that was the work we've done to make our machine translation engines adaptive. And you'll see from there's some of the quotes up there. It was that magic moment for translators where they realized, actually, this is getting better on the fly as they go, and improving that output both for them as well as other translators or reviewers working on content for that same customer. We were doing that kind of stuff with old statistical MT. We're doing it with Neural as well. And we're really proud to be one of around 4 to 5 vendors. It's a handful now who have this technology right in at the core of the AI ML space. And once you've got that kind of asset, it's this virtuous cycle, right? From that professional translation, it's getting better. It's learning from the data you've tuned it with and the edits that people are making. You unlock additional use cases from the kind of thing we may have used Google Translate before to chuck a document in and get the gist of it, but to also translate that hard to reach content, maybe lower tier content that you would never translated otherwise, but the quality's at a better place now. Or that ephemeral content, that search query, where maybe the index is too big to index in 26 languages, you can flip to English, on the German on the fly to English and use an English model. The quality is getting to that point where these kind of use cases are possible, all powered by that same AI techniques. The other area that's big for us is classification similarity, right in the sweet spot of ML's kind of capabilities, making a decision, categorizing, classifying, grouping, picking subject matters. It's one of the key things in translation. The best way to get good quality is to get the right bit of content to the right person with the right skill set of that subject matter. Before, people would be checking that kind of stuff to decide, is this arts and crafts, is this banking, is this IT? We now do that with ML. But also that same kind of techniques, that similarity classification, can be reused in other ways. So one of the ways we reuse that is a lot of customers have tons of content, but as I spoke about before, that translation memory is pairs of a source content and target language, so English into Spanish. We can use the same techniques to try and find pairs that match and then reuse them, or also find pairs that don't quite match and get them reviewed and fixed. Because most customers, when you talk to them, will tell you it's really well structured. In many places, it's not. Like this example here, it's the same thing. One's in one sentence, one's in 2 sentences. We'd want to identify that and decide that they go together, or maybe even tweak them to align them and fix them. So using that connection in 2 ways to find good stuff or decide what grouping it's in, also find things that maybe we want someone to go look at. The biggest bit of work we used, or we've been doing over the last few years, has been this workload management. I spoke about our work going up. This diagram, the projects one, those little bubbles are projects we've had, the size, the number of, the amount of work involved in it. The other side is the tasks. And that's translation's a game of multiples, right? If I get a PowerPoint file into 26 languages in professional translation, we have a translator and a reviewer that's 2 tasks. These starts to multiply up. Most of our projects now, they've got thousands of items. You've got like tens of thousands of tasks, and matching up the right resource with the right bit of content is what we do every day. And that used to be done with people. Now we use a combination of AI for what it's good for, identifying good fit, classifying content to make those decisions, and more traditional algorithmic structures to do ranking to then get that out to the right person. It's been an absolute game changer for us in terms of the amount of scale we could process in terms of people. Things they were doing before that was administrative, the system does for them now. They can crack on with managing projects, working with customers, and making sure quality is right. And this is the kind of classic challenge that I think most businesses you're probably here today have in some way. How do you get tasks allocated out? And using that in the right way to get that done. And then another more quirky approach to AI, using that similarity and checking things, was back to this quality check. We quite early on embedded in our platform a suite of quality checks, which were kind of algorithmic and rules-based to pick up quality at source. So when people are making errors in translation or review, you're identifying them and flagging them up to them. Hey, David, this looks wrong. You're drifting away from the glossary. It's pre-approved, and that kind of thing. We then looked at where could we use AI to further enhance those checks. So one great example was our antonymic check, which we had to rename to our opposite meaning check because no one knew what antonymic meant, which is basically trying to detect where the meanings drifted between 2 sentences, principally because one of our medical clients had very complicated text with lots of double negatives. It was quite easy when you're going through a significant manual to just get that wrong. And that little check enabled for the AI allowed us to just give that belts and braces part to it and really help the translators out, because that's the key, right? These guys are working for a lot of content, trying to get stuff done. It's easy to make a mistake. So using AI to start doing more advanced quality checks due to the advances in neural networks that we can deploy there. So how to get started? For me, AI is an ML is a data game, right? Garbage in, garbage out. It's all about getting your data in the right shape and doing the hard work to then be able to make the decisions you want. And there's some high-profile examples. Everyone's had that stuff up from a Google Translate or Bing Translator, any kind of service like that. But it gets the wrong data or learns from the wrong things. You get some interesting output. So for us, it's a data game. That's key to it. But the real goal, when we've been approaching it, is to try and make the AI/ML feel magic, right? It should be behind the scenes serving the user. And those moments should just be things you no longer have to do, or something just happens. And that is the goal. So to create those magic moments, there's a lot behind the scenes. And for us, it was these kind of steps we were going through. Key is that problem definition, what you're trying to solve, and then what's the right technique to be using, whether it's programmatic, rules, or AI. The mental modeling, how someone thinks, and how do they make those decisions to make sure you can get the data in the right shape to support them. Then training, experimentation, trying to make that model or algorithm production ready, then learning and refining and tuning it. That workload allocation part, the biggest challenge we had, links back to much of what Esther was talking about earlier, it was a people one. Most people in the business didn't think a system could make the same decisions as they could. And in many places, it can't, right? A system can't think or feel. But there's lots of decisions that don't require that. And that was almost our journey. And that learning and refinement was getting the buy-in and the belief and letting them see, hey, this is starting to work. But that mental modeling was absolutely critical to make sure we'd covered all bases. There's a ton of stuff out here, like toolkits. There's a rich open source community of tools, which is many of which we've went to build our models and algorithms. The big three are in the services space, and there's lots of great services now you can tap into to really get started. So, go try things out, but the preparation is absolutely critical with data and the mental model. So where it's going, most of the stuff, technologies went through the usual Gartner hype cycle and coming down into the trough of disillusionment, where people are starting to make real world use of it. And there's loads of great case studies, like just giving you a sample of what we do, but there's tons of amazing examples out there. the innovations in AI, post-AI winter of the 80s and 90s, deep learning is really changing the game for people like us who maybe don't have the explainability in AI ethics challenge per se of say, government organisations. It's got unlocking a lot of use cases that weren't there before. And for Lingo 24 particularly, a lot of it is around this AI wrapping around the translator and augmenting them to put them at the heart of it, but with all this support. So hopefully that was an interesting overview of kind of what we get up to and how we've used AI and where you may want to get started.
That was David Meikle there from Lingo 24, and a really fascinating insight into a world that I know absolutely nothing about. Always interesting to find somebody that knows the difference between an antonym and a synonym too. David, thank you very much for that. Now, David mentioned the explainability challenges of government, which leads us incredibly nicely on to our next speaker. Martin Wallace is Chief Digital Officer for the Digital Office of Scottish Local Government. And Martin wants to talk about digital impact. So Martin, over to you.
Thanks, Mark. Good morning, all. It's a pleasure to be here today. One of my kind of final Scottish talks for the year, which I'm quite chuffed about. I think just kind of looking at some of the presentations this morning that's happened already is looking at where can we learn, why reinvent wheels, where is your business or what is your business similar to that you can learn from. So if I look at kind of digital impact in local authorities, we can have a storyboard, and I swear Mark Curtis at Accenture and I have not met before this and discussed similar slides or similar topics, but talking about the experience of retail. So if we look at the current situation we have in retail, so we've got Iceland here, we've got people queuing outdoor, not necessarily socially distanced, as you can see, should be 2 meters apart wearing masks. But the fact is it's a very, very slow transaction. But like retail, we have large estates, large physical buildings across different locations and towns and villages across Scotland. And at the moment, you'll have to queue to get in to see services. It's just because of the situation we're in. If we then look at when you get into a store, so again, Iceland again, we've got a long queue. We've got people queuing to do a small interaction at the end of that journey. A small amount of data is passed between two. Is it efficient? It's a lot of people doing small kind of data transactions. The experience could also be when you're actually kind of 10 items or less, you're measuring the other person's basket in front if they're actually 12 items and you go mental. But the actual process and the service is not the most efficient. We then move on to self-serve checkouts. And I know that's not the best experience, but you've got one person from your business looking after 8 or 10 people or customers at the one time. Now, I believe the experience is a bit like online dating. You swipe right. At the end of transaction, you get unexpected items in the baggage area, and sometimes you might be left with a bag for life, but I don't know if that's true or not. But again, the efficiency has kind of increased because you've got one person looking after multiple people at the one time in the business. And if you look at, say, retail banking, we're seeing concierge services. When you go in, you'll stand in a queue, somebody will move you towards a kiosk to show you how you can do things online. So the experience is kind of a merge between online and offline. We then move to Amazon Go. So the experience for Amazon Go is you go into the shop, you take what you want and leave. Some people joke we have that in the high street at the moment, but I do decry that's disgusting because we should be looking at data to understand why people are having to steal from stores in the high street and how do we intervene early with social deprivation, issues around social care, health, mental health conditions, etc., to give them a better experience. But again, the efficiency here is that the only people from the business transacting are the ones that are actually stocking the shelves or a concierge in the corner if you have a customer experience problem. I'm not saying that council buildings should be self-serve completely all the way, but there is a merge in between the two. And then we look again, we've got kind of the classic South Korean opportunity here between Samsung and Tesco's. Tesco's could not build buildings above ground because of planning, and it was easier to do an amalgamation and thinking outside the box to create large screens with a gentleman to the right of the picture is taking pictures of what foodstuff he wants. And the only human interaction is the delivery driver delivering that to his house at the end of his journey. Now that in 5-10 years would be replaced by potentially drones. And again, not saying that this is what we want to do in local authorities at all, But again, the efficiencies that can actually be done, as I say, blending the experiences of offline and online are testament in terms of what we can do. Now, going back to Iceland, I don't know if some of you are aware of the 1997 database that was created, the Icelandabók, which is the generic heritage, the big book of Icelanders. So what developers did was create an online repository where people could go into. They could look and understand their heritage using census information, church information, archives, to look at kind of where everybody's come from, because Iceland, the Vikings and the Nordic regions, is a very, very small population. So the actual population for Iceland just now is roughly about 230,000 people. And the challenge is, because of the genetic makeup of Iceland, you can insert your own jokes here, people. I'm not doing this. I've got colleagues from across the whole of Scotland here. Is that the Icelandabók was then developed in 2013 into an app. And the app was to look at what they call kissing cousins. So the strapline, or the app was an Indigo app, but the strapline was bump the app before you bump in bed. Now, this is a classic example, is just because you've got it doesn't mean to necessarily use it. And the app, one of the features was an inbuilt incest alarm. So if you were out on a date, you could actually see how closely related you were before you continued that date going forward. So ethics is key into how you build your services. We have to understand GDPR, we have to understand where the data comes from, but service design is key to actually understand, is this something that the customer actually wants before you actually build it? So digital business ambition is fundamentally looking at the business strategy. So it's not about digital anymore, it's not a siloed entity, it's the core product. It is technology by design, it's human by default. And what I mean by this as well is looking at the business optimization that's required for improving productivity, experience, customer outcomes, as well as looking at the business transformation. So looking at new products and services, new business models, all supported with the data that you can actually release for your current systems and processes. So again, users first, build the transformation around the user. The user has to be the heart of everything you do. You have to understand what is the actual problem you want to solve. You might assume a lot of things in your current roles, but do you actually know what the customer wants? What's the customer experience like when they interact with your business, when they get your product? How do you get repetitive products being pushed out over the course of the lifetime of the engagement with the customer as well? The fact is that local government is in kind of the three phases, a new era for it. So we've taken a timeline here. We've got the impact on the horizontal, the time on the vertical, and then we've got a piece in time in 2018 when we actually put this slide together. And the rate of change is exponential. We've seen the hype, have that hype cycle with new technology comes in. So era one back in the 80s and kind of early 90s was about enterprise software for local authorities. So process-centric, about efficiency, large-scale effectiveness. Era two came in with the rise of the website. So we've got web and online services now. What? I've created a website, I've created a web form, but does it interact with the back-end systems? Do you have a channel shift? Are you actually really doing efficiency on this in terms of how you interact and support the customer and getting data and analytics from your website of how the customer is actually working through your processes and systems? And then era three, the outcome-centric era that we're now in. So it's about collaborative working. It's about digital health and care, learning. It's about redesigning services around the user, but looking at how do we actually promote better outcomes, but understanding the data that we actually pull in as well. So we've actually had principles since 2011 with Campbell Christie. So we had 6 principles around building services around users, prioritizing prevention, reducing inequalities, working together, improving performance and cost reduction. But the same could actually be applied internal business processes as well. So services built around the actual end user of our own internal processes, our staff that are actually engaging with the end user. How do we prioritize them to have the best experience? How do we actually improve performance of them? And how do we actually then help them do that in a cost efficient manner? And the good thing about Christie Commission is it sets up 3 data buckets that we can actually relate to as well. So if you want to be a data scientist, there's 3 data areas you want to have a look at. So understanding the past, where does your data reside? What's the historical data? Where's the data storage? What can you access easily? reacting to the present, so real-time data. This could be things like digital telecare, which we'll talk about in a minute or two, Internet of Things devices, more than a smart bin, and real-time data coming in from your frontline staff and services. And then looking at anticipating the future, so the analytics and predictive analytics and artificial intelligence, to using the two other data buckets to understand where you can intervene early. So things I've done with DHI, for instance, Digital Health Institute, is they've got KIT, which is a Wi-Fi scales, a Wi-Fi water bottle, located water bottle, and a step counter. They can actively predict how much risk you are of having a fall if you're elderly and infirm. So how do we use these data points to do this? And we've seen things from Oxford University just now with the algorithm for predictive analytics on COVID and long COVID and risk of death through COVID as well. So these things are important in terms of how do we actually then redesign and provide services going forward. So the world moves on. We were set up in 2016. We had a 3-year life cycle. In 2019, we were extended for 2 years. And in that point, we'd seen political context had changed. We'd seen things about improving outcomes, health and social care, education reform. We've had community empowerment. So I've already talked about Christie principles here. So the challenges and performance in 2019 by Audit Scotland also saw the digital office being mentioned as a good catalyst for change within local authorities. You've then got economic context. So the financial review of 2017-2018, we've got an increased demand for services. We all know we have a rise in the elderly population, over 60 population as well. So how do we actually then provide these services with a reduction in real-time funding? We've got forecast for further reduction, even more exacerbated now through COVID. And then we've got uncertainty with Brexit, what's going to happen out of that as well with potential market disruption. We've got societal trends, so this has obviously increased even more so during COVID with internet usage, customers' experience online with internet shopping, and increasing the role of how digital comes into how we actually deal with government. So experiences that people want are similar to actually using online banking, using the retail store. So having a similar type role, hence the fact looking at the similarities between retail and local authorities is key in terms of how do we actually improve that outcome, how do we improve that experience going forward. And then the technical revolution, the fourth technical revolution, IoT, artificial intelligence, how does that support the ways of working and outcomes that we actually want to achieve as well? So this is a classic quote last year that came out that we never thought we were going to see, but it came from Audit Scotland, where planning and implementing changes is no longer we need to do for redesigning of services to deliver where it's required, but more importantly, joined up services between health and care, education, with the police, Scotland, with third sector parties, and that's been something that's been kind of accelerated through COVID, which I'll cover in a couple of minutes. So March 2020, we all know, what a year March 2020 was for all of us. March 2020, I think, or somebody just said 2020 t-shirt saying it was shit. I think that's probably quite wise. But by April, my colleagues in Falkirk Council were issuing tweets such as don't drink bleach. That's where we've got to in society. Don't drink bleach. I said we had the strategic priorities for 2019 to 2022, and we released a business plan back in October last year, but that just went, completely gone by February, where we had to reprioritise what we wanted to do for councils and how we support councils with rapid digital transformation. So the strategic priorities we did have were health and care, learning, teaching, digital place, so planning, IoT, open data, digital councils, online services, automation, and workplace. And workplace was key for acceleration through COVID. Digital leadership and skills to support this new way of working, and digital foundations, a technology stack to do this. But back in March or the end of February, we spent 6 hours creating a business continuity plan for the digital office to then get out and look at response of COVID. How do we help support our councils through this mental situation that we found ourselves in? The recovery, how do we support recovery going forward after the initial response and then renewal, and really focusing on the societal, the economic, the health and the workforce support that's actually going to be required to make this happen. So in March, we set up a cross-sector data task force with Scottish Government, health professionals, academia and third sector and Police Scotland to look at what operational data we need to make strategic and tactical actions and decisions on. We set this up, we then handed it back to Scottish Government to run for us, and it still continues to this day, and that will continue going forward as well. Other things we set up was an app with help from Scotland Excel, our procurement partners, and Microsoft Scotland within 5-6 days to support shielding people, and we had 9 councils using that within about 2 weeks of inception, which had been unheard of because normally these big things take about 6 to 12 months to come to fruition. We'd also supported Connecting Scotland with SCVO and Scottish Government for 9,000 devices out to vulnerable families, and an additional 70,000 devices out for vulnerable children, which is still continuing just now, and 40,000 connectivity options as well for this. So big push to help with this kind of remote blended learning support, but also just making sure we've got that support in the field to take things forward. We'd also done advice on digital telecare. We did put advice out for working remotely. We worked with SPDS and set up a new programme around a bit modern workplace to help leaders and managers and staff understand how they can be supported whilst working remotely. Not working from home, but working from remotely is key here, and something I've done for 20 years. So it's not about the technology, but it's about that cultural shift that's required, and support, especially mental health, when you're stuck behind a screen like 8 hours a day, like I'm just now, talking to you all, and how do we actually make sure there's breaks and support put in these things as well. So we had the revised plan already, programme of work in 2019-2020. We just tweaked it very, very slightly to react to the current situation with COVID. And then if you actually look at how we then support it going forward, there's a new business plan being launched in the next couple of weeks for the next 12 months of the digital office. Our programme finishes in October next year. We're looking at options of how to extend it again. With Solace and the Chief Execs and COSLA. And we've been working with Scottish Government, as Kate Forbes had announced this morning, on the reformed Digital Scotland's strategy, which has been a co-work between local authorities and Scottish Government. It's not just been Scottish Government, it has been with partners such as COSLA, Digital Office and Improvement Service to make sure it's a once for all for Scotland approach as well. So the revised programme of work is here, but if we actually look at then where we have to place this, is that we have 25 key business functions. And we have to support these people actually doing their day-to-day jobs in this new world of complete working remotely, looking at how do we safely have experiences for staff when they come back to the office, but more importantly, how do we support the citizen, the patient or the customer in these situations as well. So how do we deliver these things? So we actually work in principles in Digital Office and across the partnership. So we have human by default technology by design. Just because you've got augmented reality, or just because you've got a database of Icelandic genealogy, doesn't mean to say you actually have to do something with it. You know, we have to understand what is that problem, what is that customer service journey that we want to tackle, and how do we then combine things together to make this happen. Understand to be understood. It's about understanding what is that customer problem, what is the council problem, what is the staff problem, to be understood. And customers shouldn't necessarily just be the citizen, it should be our own staff. How do we support our own staff in this modern way of working? Decision making needs to be instantaneous. We cannot wait any longer for long processes and massive governance. We had collapsed quite a bit of governance on the Digital Office to become a bit more fluid in Digital Office 2, as we called it last year. But we really have to help with decision making using data and using facts rather than just feelings, because it just doesn't work that way. Then organisation and people have to be empowered to work together. So what is the common goal? The common goal is actually supporting the citizen. The common goal is supporting each other. So we have to then look at the cultural shift that's required and the data to make these things happen as well. Communications have to be need to be active and proactive. No longer can we be reactive to stuff. We have to anticipate what that future brings. So again, comes back to the power of data. And then we are one team. There are no silos, no egos. The thing that I have seen from conversations with chief execs and heads of service across councils the last couple of months, there's 3 key emerging themes that we have to concentrate on. So there's that continual support for remote working. There's the cost optimization that has to be looked at. So we're working with Scotland Excel. We've got a new tool for managing contracts and procurement, and we'll be looking for common platforms and how do we reduce the amount of suppliers we have in local authorities to get efficiencies, and also just make sure that we've actually got the best of breed cyber secure software and solutions that are actually being required as well. And the last thing we've kind of understood is the intelligence from data. You know, understanding, unlocking the opportunities that data can actually give us to have richer outcomes and experiences for our citizens is key for actual full transformation. And then we're all working to those common set of goals as well. So delivery, how do we do this? We've got 4 S's. So we've got shaping the future, so shaping, sharing our experiences, shifting our practices, and then scaling our solutions. So the digital office and digital partnership. So the digital partnerships, all 32 councils, including also Improvement Service and COSLA, Scotland Excel, CMIS, who do the management information for education, and Socketim. And in the shaping, we understand what is the business problem, what is the vision, what is the strategy, how do we shape this together, how do we combine and collaborate to get this, and then sharing our experiences as exemplify the benefits through use cases, customer case studies, looking at best examples across councils when we've done our digital maturities with councils, to then sort of push what the opportunity could actually be and the benefits that could be realised from doing this. The shifting our practices is facilitating adoption, and that's basically back over to the councils to provide extra support, whether it's human support, people, or financial support, to then build proof of concepts, and then taking that to the scaling our solutions, support the big bang deployment. And necessarily these things could be also collaborative procurement. So things we're looking at just now are social work replacement systems going to go live in a couple of weeks' time with Scotland Excel. We're going to have a procurement in the new year for Internet of Things platforms, and also looking at robotic process automation as well. And RPA is the big thing that's out there. A lot of people want to use it. It's about supporting staff with a similar type of experience they'd have with an automatic assistant they'd have in their home, such as Google and Amazon. But it's not about replacing jobs. It's about freeing up staff to do the more face-to-face human element of the role, rather than having to be stuck with admin. And ideally, we're looking for 2 suppliers, 3 suppliers for that, rather than having in 25 different services, having umpteen different suppliers, because therefore we've lost the opportunity that's there for optimizing the costs, etc. as well. So in summary, I always like to end on a quote: the best way to predict the future is to create it, and that's from Peter Drucker. So shaping, build the business case and thought leadership through collaboration internally and with partners. Share, why reinvent wheels? Find and promote best practice, benefits and wins. And coming to events like this, you can certainly find case studies and ideas that you can actually then shape and share yourself. Shifting, we'll accelerate and shift quicker through our collaboration. And then scaling, Once for Scotland approach is key to this. And I will stop there at that whirlwind tour, and hopefully there'll be some questions for Mark to push through the teams.
There are indeed, Martin. Thank you very much for that. Just to remind you, if you have a question for any of the last 3 speakers, there's still plenty of time to stick it in at the bottom of your screen. I'll try and get through them. I was actually going to ask my own question first, but it ties in with one that's come in. I am curious, this is to all 3 of you. I'm curious what the mood music is at the moment in the digital community, because arguably we all went to bed in Morningside, and then March the 23rd, we woke up in the Wild West. When the gloves were off, the brakes were off, everything was off. And Kirsty Holmes from Computershare has come in saying, is the risk associated with losing aspects of governance overall worth it for the sake of fast decisions? I've always been under the impression that good governance is key to reducing risk. Esther, do you want to address that for a start? I can't hear you, unfortunately, Esther. I don't know whether anyone else can.
Can anyone hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now. Crack on. Sorry.
Okay, great. Sorry. I was saying I completely agree with Kirsty. I think good governance that is done in the right way for the right reasons is a great constraint to help. However, in extraordinary circumstances, we need to understand what the tolerance is for that. So there are some manoeuvres that have been done by the UK government or on the Scottish government level that I think have reduced some governance, which is quite concerning. But I think in general, we need it in order to make sure that we do things for the right reasons and that we're accountable for the decisions that we make. But we do need to make sure that we can be flexible and work within the governance. So things that were holding back certain things within the NHS services, were they really actually an issue of governance, or were they an issue of attitude that we've always done it this way, so it's too high risk to move the service online? What you can actually do is create a product, a service, or a new way of doing things within the governance that actually already exists. And it's just about trying to think about things slightly differently. So I'm actually all for governance. I like working within constraints, but I think we should have the ability to challenge them and try and be flexible when we need to be.
David, what do you think of this?
So obviously a very different context in the private sector from the likes of Martin, who has a lot more rigour and structure around him. But certainly we were already kind of pretty online and digital by default. Most of our team are quite remote. We did have hubs. We had to shut down on the back of COVID and move everyone remotely. But I think it was easier for us on that. But what I did find was decisions had to be made quicker, context changing rapidly. You still need good governance, obviously, but a tolerance to risk kind of went down a bit. Like you all went up. You could make decisions, and people would tolerate them being slightly wrong and resetting them in a way that it probably wouldn't in the past, and challenge assumptions that were there. That probably, like Esther is talking about, more experience-based as opposed to really database. And you've got your team. Their kids are coming in and during the call, the things that we're all dealing with and operating in, and things that you would have felt were you're trying to avoid that before. The game's changed, and I think it's good. It's a good thing. We've all become a bit more tolerant and able to make decisions and accept things and adjust in a way that we weren't before, and long may it continue.
Yeah, it's an interesting perspective, that, Martin, isn't it? Because, I mean, in the past you would have thought, oh, that's it, it's a career-ending move. Whereas nowadays we're sitting there thinking, yes, I have a cat, get over it.
Yeah, I think, we have to obviously operate in a legal context. You can't do anything illegal. I mean, God forbid. I don't want to see myself in the front of the Daily Record. There's too many people in government, and on the front of the Daily Record as it is, and other newspapers are available, may I add. But I think that there's an operating governance that you have to have to make it legal, but it's about working around principles. So the kind of principles I've mentioned around having, no egos, no silos, it's about the common good. And I think if you can wrap around the common good to make sure that the patient, the citizen, the customer is supported through, these crazy times, then you've won. There's obviously GDPR you have to handle as well. But again, it comes back to, there's a great slide Alexander Holt from CivTech has used in the past about, you've got the legal policy, you've then got the interpretation, and then you've got the organisation's interpretation of the rules. So if you actually go back to this, what is it actually saying? What is the operating principles you have to operate around, and then work from them? The interpretations come, and I've seen local authorities where they've had issues or challenges around remote working or supporting bring your own device, being forced into a position, we need to get this done. Now, by being forced to get it done, there's workarounds, but learning from other local authorities round about them to find out, well, what software are you using, how are you doing it, how did you manage it, and then replicating it. So again, it comes back to the operating principle of, well, what do you want to achieve? How do we use the structure we've got to then achieve the outcomes we want to have? But again, it shouldn't be done by multiple committees. You don't have time, especially in a pandemic, to do that.
Yeah, there's another excellent point come in from Sven Hunter from Orkney Islands Council, and I suspect this is a cry from the heart. How do local authorities deal with the fact that they are obliged to offer services to literally everyone? What are the limits? How does it compare and contrast with private sector digital services, which can pick and choose their target? Martin, that's got to go to you first.
Yeah, I think, if we can shift as many people online as possible, then we can reinvest the savings that we've got there to the people that critically need face-to-face, and that's always been the given. Not everybody has digital connectivity in Scotland. Not everybody has the digital confidence or the skills to get online. Certainly with Connecting Scotland and then the new strategy that's being co-produced between local authorities and Scottish Government, there's a big thing about digital exclusion and inclusion. So, that would be a long-term tackle, but absolutely, we can't pick and choose, and nor should we. Absolutely not. Everybody has, at some point in their life will have an engagement with a local authority or health board, whether that's through a bin problem to a complex health condition or an ailing health condition that requires health and social care to intervene. So I think it is about getting as much stuff online and understanding the data and understanding the data sets of where aren't we performing well, where are the most vulnerable people that we haven't maybe quite touched, how do we support them, and then using those data sets to then support that.
It's interesting that the whole the whole issue of inclusion or exclusion, Esther, it was something you said. You said you have to ask as a business, why do you exist? And there was an echo in the back of my head as you said that, of Rishi Sunak, the Chancellor, talking about viable jobs. And that's we're talking about exclusion there. There's a big yawning chasm right in front of us, right there.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. It's a difficult thing for anyone who has to provide a universal design or service or access to a service. I think the key is for people to understand what they are dealing with. So what I hope when Rishi Sunak said that he's actually done some research into the businesses, what he considers viable and what not. I mean, I don't really know how he's defined that. And I think that comes back to what Martin was saying. You need to sometimes go back to the definition of what are we actually talking about here in order to say what we're doing. So from a local government perspective, I think it would be imperative for them to define who their audience are. Who are the people who use their services? How many of them do have digital access? How many of them have high-speed digital access? And then the idea is, from what we would always recommend, is that you try and develop services so people can self-serve as much as possible if they can. And that may be using machine learning or algorithms or robotic processes, but then you still have the people with human interaction for either complex cases or for people who need to have language translations, people who are illiterate. We have a huge illiteracy problem in Scotland. We need to make sure that we develop services that are available to them. So I believe in a hybrid where people can self-serve as much as possible, but when they need help or they need to have a human interaction, that they should. And that way, if we do that, then I think we will actually create more viable local government services, but also businesses, because you'll have lots of jobs for people to work in automating services, working in communications, but lots of people who are people who can still do things, still talk to people. And that's why I see that kind of future of dealing with universal services. And it's just about understanding who is your local customer base. Edinburgh is very different from Glasgow, which is very different to Orkney, which is very different to Aberdeen. So who are the people making up your constituency? And how can you serve them in the best way?
It's a good point, that, David, isn't it? Because, to my mind, people they're getting to be at a premium, truth to be told. It's maybe just the fact that I am no longer middle-aged, that, I notice the fact now that there's a whole generation coming in who are really not happy face-to-face. How do you design a system whereby, yes, I'm quite happy self-serving there, but at this stage now, I definitely need a human being, and you can actually make it work? David, back to you.
Oh, sorry. But I think it's an interesting dynamic, right? That obviously, as Swain calls out a private sector, you can pick and choose the segment that you serve. But going back to Martin's principles, human by default is the key thing. And we have different cohorts of people and different needs. I know, personally, I will always gravitate to the self-checkout in the supermarket. I will not gravitate to a chatbot, but people are all different. And there's a great case study from a Malaysian bank where they redesigned, went digital, transformed their loan application process, and they actually made it worse because it was less flexible. It was more complex to fill in. Anyone who's read some of those case studies will see it. And that's the core back to it. There's some parts of a digital process that systems are good at and algorithms are good at, but when you've got a complex interaction, there's a question here about AI and the limitations. It doesn't have qualia, it can't think or feel. You need that person-to-person bit. And whether you're a business, whether you're a local government, you need to be able to serve different segments of your user base, but also handle those different layers of interaction, whether it's someone who can sail through or needs a more complex intervention. That's the reality of all businesses. It's more marked in public sector for sure, because there's a legal obligation, but everyone has to do that. If you've got a translator stuck, we need to be wrapping support around them. Everyone's got that challenge.
If I can come in, I think what has been highlighted is that people who do hide behind a screen or do hide behind their phone. I mean, I think my daughter's face is actually an Apple symbol these days when I'm talking to her. But I think what has been proven is that need for human interaction in the world. So, we're seeing, challenges around about lockdown. We're seeing mental health, challenges increase within communities. We're seeing, the challenge around about, the restrictions put on about 6 o'clock closing, pubs closing, etc. And having that human interaction is key for human development and nurture, because it's basically part of human nature. It's part of our behavioural psychology. We do need that human interaction. So I don't think everything's going to replace with bots, etc. completely. I think it has to become down to choice on how you want to engage. If it's a choice to do things online and you prefer that, then that's great. If you still want to see a human interaction, whether that's through a video conferencing thing, having your quiz nights, God forbid we go back to that stage again of lockdown, please no, on a Friday, God. You never realise how competitive your parents are until they're actually online, do you? But I think there is that need for human interaction still there. And again, it just comes down to element of choice. We've got a legal obligation. I think if you can make the experience as human as possible, understanding, again, going back to service design, what is the human issue? If you can make that issue go away, then they're going to like what they're going to get the experience, whether that's face-to-face or online.
Jim Cumming has asked a question. What happens to the people whose jobs are actually replaced by technology? Esther?
Those people whose jobs are replaced by technology will retrain potentially. They'll be available to do other things. It's a difficult situation. It happens in every major changing point in society. As we develop as a society and as a human race, our industry changes, our world changes. So do you know what? There were people who were making CFC gases for hairsprays in the 80s, and they don't have jobs now making CFC gases for hairsprays because it's banned. It's a terrible thing to do. They have new jobs. And it's one of these things that I think we need to, as a society, understand and embrace now. And understand that, understand the fears of the people whose jobs are going to be replaced, and understand what they need in order to move forward and not be left behind, as maybe we have done previously when we shut down coal mines and things like that. We don't want to see that happen, because that will increase the issue of exclusion. And what we really need in this new way, I believe, is to get as many minds with as many backgrounds as possible working on the same problems, because we all have experience, we all have something to add. So whether your job is going to be automated because you were manning, I think you'll still actually be doing some customer interaction. Just some of what you're doing may become automated. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but you should be able to help design that automation, because you are that subject matter expert. There are always challenges, but you can turn that challenge to an opportunity if we as a society do that, and the governments and the education people actually support that.
Just a point that you made there about the CFCs, and the point that Mark was making about, please God, no more Zoom quizzes. Did you know that the chemist who designed CFCs in the first place was exactly the same person that pioneered putting lead into petrol? One person.
I did not. Wow.
You're talking about what impact has my career made. That man can actually make a claim. Just
bring back hanging.
Gosh, he's like, Oppenheimer's got nothing on him, right?
Right. Martin, this comes from Barry McGeehee from NatWest. It says, you mentioned the work carried out to get devices out to those that require them, along with the digital education activity to support this. What difference are you seeing this making in terms of people's engagement with digital? And what more do you feel needs to be done to help the less digital savvy feel confident in a post-COVID world to remain digital and not return to a face-to-face service when it's not required? I'll go to you that first, Martin, but I suspect you probably all got a view in this, because the pendulum has swung. What's stopping it swinging back in the opposite direction? So Martin first.
So it has to be, what's in it for me? That's the first thing. What's the benefit for me for actually doing this? If you give, so the Connecting Scotland programme, we've worked with SCVO. So SCVO, Scottish Government, came up with the concept. We got funding. We've supported that through the distribution around about education teams, etc. as well. And there's going to be another announcement made. I can't talk about that because that's under embargo. But how we then support that is SCVO have got digital champions training courses. There's stuff online. There's stuff in from Carnegie Institute as well. So there's a lot of collateral there to help support getting people online. It's about giving them the benefit of it. I mean, I remember years ago working with a council down south, may I add, this is a previous life before this role, where they'd spent 3 months building a website to show people how to get online. With videos, how to help guides and stuff, a website. And when I spoke to them, how do they get online? How do they show it? Well, they go to the website. I said, to do what? To show how to get online. They're like, really? And then explained, I went, oh crap, we've buggered this one up. So, there is, again, what's in it for them. And there's a whole range of different entities and support we could actually use through third sector to help with this. One thing I'm looking at just now with health and care is looking at a catalogue of apps that are being used. So we've got, Test and Protect app. Hopefully you've all got it downloaded on your phones and got your Bluetooth on. Thank you very much, to help protect each other. But, having a catalogue of apps available to send to education departments, to health boards, to GPs, etc. We've seen trials of GPs actually administering prescriptions of apps rather than actual drugs to help with weight management, etc. So, again, it's just that cultural change of what's in it for me and making it beneficial. Never there will be a day where somebody says, well, I really want to be online because I can get my teaching online, or I can report a pothole from a local council. It has to be expanded on that one. So it's about digital confidence. There's a paper somewhere on the dark web, I shouldn't say the dark web, I did years ago when I was at O2 about the Wallace hierarchy of needs, how to be egotistical, where I was mapping Maslow with digital ambition, with acuity and what's again for raising confidence levels. And I very much believe that it's not just about accessing online services for health and care and education. It has to be about social interaction. It has to be about having your Zoom quizzes if you want with colleagues and friends. It's about learning, experiencing and just building confidence through using different parts of web and apps, etc., to benefit your life, to make better choices.
David?
I think it'll be interesting to see how it unwinds, because everyone's been forced into this situation to talk to friends and family. You've had to get into the digital world, and as Martin said, I think it's the key point here. It's what's the benefit for me. I found someone who wants to go and have that face-to-face interaction, just talk to someone down in the local town centre. Having the app is not going to change that dynamic for me, and I think it's incumbent on us of kind of, as we're designing services and designing solutions, making sure we're considering that human, what's in it for them, and trying to design ones that people want to use. That's going to be the key here. I don't think there's anything you can do to change that at an individual level, apart from delivering services and solutions that they want to use, and therefore they do it. I think there's now a faster, broader pool of people who are digitally confident. And there's, as Martin's talking about, all the support out there as well that people will have no doubt tapped into and be able to continue tapping into. I know it from my own experience from my grandparents when they were around. They were always scared of it. And then when you finally got a use case for them to use it, they kind of got into it. And then they're suddenly on the family WhatsApp chat and they can participate. But taking that first step was always the barrier. People have had to take that first step. Hopefully, they'll be confident enough to continue where there's services that attract them.
Esther?
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that you can't really replace the hug of a friend with a hug over Zoom, although I have discovered recently that you can actually quite effectively do hugs. It's very odd. Yeah, I think there's always going to be the need for that. I think what we will see is, as with any new technology or new way of doing things, you have your early adopters, and then that hits critical mass. If we can increase the number of people who have access to broadband, good quality broadband or 5G networks, if we can help educate people that 5G is not going to melt their brains or give them coronavirus, they will adopt it faster. And I think all of those things will help. And I just think it's good, exactly what you just said, David. Like my mother, start of lockdown, like my mother lives in London, start of lockdown, I don't need to Skype with you. I don't need to do it. Now we Skype once a week. She's Zooming with her book club. And it's more about her friends doing it. Everyone is doing it. So why would you not do it? Because you're either going to go straight in and download House Party and start jumping in random conversations with people, or you're going to hold out and see how it all plays out and what platform is everyone on? So I think it's really interesting because we're all so focused on it because we've got nothing else to do than look at these things and dissect them. But it's really no different from an iPod or an Alexa. I mean, God, when Alexas came out, everyone was like, don't get an Alexa. I was an early adopter. Now everyone's forgot them. They're prolific. So, you know, I think it's going to be the same. But look, God, I miss hugs. I live on my own. I'm so lucky I've got a cat. But yeah, human interaction, nothing can beat it.
If you have tears, I was going to ask you to demonstrate an online hug, but sadly we're out of time. Thank you so much. I feel warmer now. Warmer and much more appreciated. By Thomas Midgley Jr. That was the chap.
Okay, cool.
And led in petrol. So presumably Thomas Midgley Sr. was very, very proud of him. Thank you very much, all three of you, for your presentations. That was excellent. So really interesting stuff in that. And thank you too for your questions. We're going to take a quick 15-minute break now. When we come back at 12:05, there are 4 breakouts. So don't forget to select the one session that you would like to attend. There'll then be a lunch break from 12:35 to 1:30, and we will see you after that. Take the opportunity now to actually visit the exhibition hall during the break. That's at lunchtime. See the solutions on offer, and please support our sponsors, without whom none of this would be possible. Don't forget to enter the prize draws too. From me, Mark Stephen, thanks very much.